Hello again, friends, and welcome to another edition of If This Car Could Talk. Today we'll be looking at the innovative Studebaker Wagonaire, a car built from 1963 until the company's demise 4 model years later in 1966. But first, a little about Studebaker. Founded in South Bend, Indiana in 1852, the German-born family patriarch was John, who eventually sired 5 sons. In birth order, there was Henry, Clement, John, Peter, and Jacob. At first, John, Henry, and Clement built horse-drawn buggies, carriages, and wagons, while also making harnesses. A large portion of their business at the time was supplying miners, prospectors, and settlers traveling west to try their hand at achieving the American dream. All of those folks would need pickaxes, pans for river panning, shovels, and wheelbarrows. The Studebakers soon had a reputation for durability, quality, ruggedness, and value. Because they were now a national company, Studebaker finally incorporated in 1868. By 1902, the age of pioneers making mining claims out west was nearly over, so the Studebakers focused their attention on the insanely popular new horseless carriage, or automobile, as they would soon be known. Ironically, it was first designed as an electric car, using standard at the time larger 6-volt commercial batteries, and people think it's a relatively new technology. As we've seen recently, these early EVs were not as well received as gasoline and kerosene counterparts, so in partnership with several smaller auto builders, Studebaker offered their first internal combustion engine-powered cars in 1904. By 1912, Studebaker was producing cars and commercial trucks entirely on their own. At the time, vehicles were evolving to be affordable and reliable, thanks to Ford's Model T, every other company's main competitor. Roads were being built everywhere you looked, so because of their reputation, Studebakers started selling well. By 1919, the company had produced its last horse-drawn wagons and other antiquated items to fully concentrate on automobile production. Studebaker was selling a lot of vehicles, having established a sizable and varied dealer network all across North America. They supplied the U.S. government with various munitions and vehicle-related products in both world wars, the Korean conflict, and in times of peace. However, by 1954, Studebaker was forced to merge with Packard, another great American auto manufacturer, in hopes that both could survive the 1950s and beyond. Surprisingly, the first regular production Studebaker station wagon built was called Conestoga in 1954. The company strategically used a model name from its earliest history to convey ruggedness and dependability. From now until 1966, Studebaker would build many different wagon-type cars based on several different model lines, in both 2- and 4-door body styles. At the time, wagons accounted for a huge portion of overall sales for the industry, but most of Studebaker's competitors offered larger and more powerful models to entice sales. Thus, wagons were never really phenomenal sellers for the company. By the time the recession of the late 1950s had subsided, Studebaker was in real trouble. Had it not been for the economy-sized Lark, they probably would have thrown in the towel by 1960 or 61. But scrappy Studebaker still had some life left. In 1962, they debuted the beautiful Gran Turismo Hawk, a geniusly restyled Hawk from earlier models, penned by one of the greatest automotive designers of all time, Milwaukee-based Brooks Stevens. Mr. Stevens is also responsible for many other iconic designs during his career, including the new 1963 Studebaker Wagonaire station wagon for the Lark series. It was a 4-door wagon, but the rear cargo compartment's roof was movable, sliding into the front part of the roof at the push of a button. This allowed anyone to transport larger items that wouldn't normally fit in a traditional wagon. Early on, these cars had issues with water leakage, a problem engineers soon remedied. For '63, Studebaker offered a full line of Larks on wheelbases of 109 and 113 inches. They were available in various series. The Standard was entry-level, the Regal was mid-level, and the Custom was positioned right in the middle between the two lowest-priced models and the two highest-priced models. The Daytona was the premium and sporty car and probably got the most attention from buyers in dealer showrooms. Finally, the all-new Wagonaire was a non-traditional four-door station wagon model with a sliding rear roof and was available in both Regal and Daytona trim. Also coming to fruition for 1963 was the legendary Avanti, a high-performance, naturally aspirated Studebaker-built 289 4-barrel known as the R1. It made an easy 240 horsepower. A Paxson supercharged 289 was dubbed the R2 and produced 1 horsepower per cubic inch. It was optional on the Avanti, the GT Hawk, and the Lark. To compete in the horsepower wars that were brewing, Studebaker also offered an R3 and an R4 engine, both displacing 304.5 cubic inches. These two engines were generally considered race-only and only available over the counter. Because the '63 models were being built in Indiana, the standard and optional Studebaker-built engine offerings included the 169 cubic inch Skybolt straight 6, good for 112 horsepower, or the 259 cubic inch Power Thrust V8, rated at 180 horsepower with a 2-barrel carb. Bolt a 4th rotor on, and that 259 would add another 15 horsepower. The first step up from this engine is another V8 displacing 289 cubic inches and called the Thunderbolt. Depending on fuel induction, these engines made either 210 or 225 horsepower. Up from there are the jet thrust engine choices I mentioned earlier. The new Wagonaire was a car Studebaker felt would be their bestseller, so it got top billing in their print and media-based advertising for 1963. They called it 3 cars in 1 and the world's only wagon convertible. Ads stressed the utilitarian nature of this design. Though it was essentially a 6-passenger wagon, it could also be ordered with a rear-facing hideaway third seat that could easily and safely transport smaller children. When so equipped, special captive air tires were produced since there was no longer any room for a spare tire. I guess you'd say it was an early version of today's run-flat tire. Of course, when that novelty roof panel was slid forward, the sky was the limit for carrying anything and everything. The rear window retracted electrically or manually into the tailgate. During the model year, a safety switch was designed and installed, making the window inoperable when the tailgate was open. At about the same time, the mechanism was added to the sliding roof that allowed for positive locking of the roof in 3 different positions. By December of '63, Studebaker management opted to completely shut down the antiquated South Bend assembly plant and redirect all future production to their Hamilton, Ontario, Canada plant. Packard was in the history books by now, so it was just Studebaker clawing for survival. Hamilton was a much more modern plant, and transitioning to Studebaker-only production was easy. Several models would never transition to Canadian production, and would signal the beginning of the end for this once great company. The Avanti, the GT Hawk, the Challenger models, all the high-performance engines, and the 4-speed manual gearboxes were all discontinued when the company moved to the Great White North. 1965 offerings were now the base model Commander, offered as a 2-door sedan, a 4-door sedan, and a Wagonaire. The sporty Daytona came as a 2-door hardtop, a convertible, or a Wagonaire. Finally, the Cruiser was the most luxurious model, available only as a 4-door sedan. The 65 cars would essentially appear the same as their 64 counterparts. They still retained the handsome S hood ornament and had removable rear quarter panels to expedite rear body damage repair. All the engines needed in Canada for late 64 production continued to be built in Indiana to fulfill union contracts and to exhaust all remaining inventory. Soon the plant needed options to keep acquiring a new steady supply of engines, because the Hamilton plant did not have casting capabilities. Engines that would now be under hood during late 64 production were now supplied by McKinnon Industries, a GM subsidiary located in nearby St. Catharines. All were Chevrolet designs. The remaining 64 models were seamlessly assembled without many issues and continued to sell modestly. One easy way to identify a Canadian-built car: while looking at the dash, look for the interior delete plates on cars that read Studebaker of Canada. Another obvious clue is that serial numbers now begin with the letter C, and any 1964 model produced after December 20th of 1963 was certainly assembled in Hamilton, Ontario. Finally, the power plants were now GM supplied, as mentioned earlier. For 1965, front disc brakes were again available for all models, but were now activated by a dual reservoir master cylinder. This was fully 2 years before the U.S. government would require this important safety feature on all 67 models sold in the American market. An aluminized muffler was again standard, and as usual, many options could be ordered. Exterior colors available as single or two-tone combinations. Inside there were 4 different color choices, and depending on the model, the material could be drastically different. To advertise these Canadian-built cars for 1965, Studebaker called them the common sense car. The bodies and most features remained unchanged from the 1964 models in an obvious attempt to save money on a redesign. Print advertising explains, though not convincingly, that a buyer can save the cost of changing automobile body styles every year. The ad goes on to say that Studebaker's beautiful modern style doesn't need styling changes. The money saved is passed on to you in added comfort and quality, and in continuing engineering improvements. And because Studebaker styling won't become obsolete, your car will look new year after year. See your dealer now. Well, nice try, Studebaker, but I don't think anyone ever believed it. For the final year, the company once again called on the talents of designer Brooks Stevens. The cars were now quite different than last year's models. Many people did not find it attractive, and along with everyone knowing this was Studebaker's final year, the 66s did not sell well at all. For this year, the Wagonaire only had a fixed roof. A total of about 12,000 sliding roof Wagonaires were sold. The company quietly faded into the future from its storied past on March 17th of 66. Though that was over 60 years ago, this independent make is now orphaned, but not forgotten. The Studebaker Drivers Club still boasts well over 12,000 active members in chapters around the world. That's pretty impressive. Our feature car is a beautifully restored 1965 model that also has had tasteful modifications done to it. It now has a 327 small block Chevy engine, which was a direct bolt-in for the original 283. Out of just 1,824 ever built, it's on display at the very impressive Martin Auto Museum in Phoenix, Arizona. If you're in the area, it's well worth a visit. Please tell us in the comments how you would have optioned your Wagonaire if you'd had the opportunity to go back in time and order one new. Relay any other Studebaker stories you may have. And thanks for watching.